For a long time, abandoned places were my whole world, a world I shared with my younger brother, Owen, and the promise I made to him was something I could never escape, no matter how many years passed, no matter how far I tried to run from the crumbling skeletons of old houses and ruined hallways. I didn't stop exploring because I was afraid of rotten floors or broken glass. I stopped because every empty building became a mausoleum, and every shattered window became a jagged reminder of what I had done. Every time I thought about stepping back into that darkness, the memories took over. The icy pressure in my chest, my pounding heart, the sweat gathering in my palms. Owen was 2 years younger than me, reckless and hungry for every secret the world tried to hide. He was the kind of kid who climbed through a window before you even had time to check for a no trespassing sign. The kind who vanished inside before you had made up your mind. I was supposed to be the older one, the braver one, but he was always the one pulling me forward. If I found an old barn worth checking out, he was already inside. If I hesitated at the edge of the woods, he would just flash that crooked grin and wave me over. He was fearless, or maybe just too young to know what fear really was. One night, we were sitting in a rotting gazebo with flashlights that were already dying and a backpack stuffed with gear for the future, a cracked compass, a frayed rope, tactical gloves our parents had given us. To him, they were sacred relics. He said, "When we're older, we'll visit every abandoned place, hospitals, surviving ghost towns. Promise me we'll keep doing this forever." I should have laughed it off, but instead, I shook his hand and promised. When you're young, some promises feel magical. A year later, I got my driver's license. I decided to take everyone on a trip. I found us a place, an empty house far outside town, standing alone among weeds and overgrowth. A house with no scary stories or local legends attached to it. Just one of those places that used to be full of life, and now, for some reason, stands abandoned. I convinced everyone to go. Mom agreed reluctantly, joking about my newly earned license. Dad had doubts, but Owen was relentless, so eventually, Dad agreed too. The kid talked the whole drive about our future trips. He spoke about that house like it was our first real Urbex, the beginning of endless adventures. We never made it there. The crash is a wound too deep to truly describe. I remember the bend in the road, my sweaty hands on the wheel, the screech of tires. I remember my mother's last word, Owen's quiet breath, the sound of glass and metal breaking apart. But more than anything, I remember that I was the one driving. That was all it took. One mistake. My mother and Owen died. My father survived, but something inside him went out and died with them. He made it through the funeral, then through our house, no longer like a man, but like a shadow. In the end, he disappeared, leaving behind only the echo of what our family used to be. I never tried to find him. I don't think he wanted that, and I was left alone, with a promise I could never keep, and a guilt that never went away. After that, I stayed far away from abandoned places. Even the thought of them made me feel sick, as if the past could close over me again and finish what it had started. Therapy helped me survive, but it never freed me from the voices, their voices, the ones that came back whenever I was alone, especially Owen's voice, tangled up with that old promise I could never fulfill. Years passed. I tried to build a new life, but everything I did was just a slow, circling around an unfinished story. In the end, I started to understand that the only way forward was to keep my promise, to go to the house at the edge of town, to the place where everything ended before it had even really begun. When I finally drove there, the sun was already setting, stretching long shadows across the fields. The main road turned into a narrow, cracked route. Trees pressed in from both sides, and the silence became suffocating. I tightened my hands on the wheel and felt that old fear rising inside me again, clawing its way up from my gut into my throat. I was driving very slowly, very carefully. I hadn't been behind the wheel since that day. Then suddenly, a truck appeared behind me. Its horn ripped through the silence so violently that my whole body tensed. For a moment, I saw headlights in the mirror, and panic hit me like a wave. I barely managed to pull onto the shoulder, shaking so badly I almost dropped the keys. I sat there, staring at the empty road, and whispered, "I'm sorry." Not to the driver, to the ghosts. 20 minutes passed before I started driving again. The house was smaller than I remembered, crouched behind wild grass and broken trees, like gray bones against the darkening sky. It looked like every other ruin I had ever seen, but there was something about it that made my heart slam painfully against my ribs. I almost turned back. Instead, I grabbed my flashlight, stepped through the sagging side door, and forced myself inside. The air was stale, heavy with dust and rot. My footsteps echoed through the empty hallway. The first rooms were quiet, stripped bare except for shadows and debris. A sunken sofa, a split table, an old rug. For a moment, I almost felt like I used to. Maybe that was all it would take. One visit, just to feel that wonderful sense of nostalgia again. I thought about Owen, about the way he always rushed ahead, the beam of his flashlight bouncing off the walls, his laughter echoing through empty rooms. For one heartbeat, I let myself remember him alive, not as a loss, but as my younger brother, the one who could make any place feel like home. Right after that, a wave of pain and longing hit me so hard I couldn't stop the tears. My beloved little brother, and my wonderful mother. Why them? Why not me? I wiped my face and went upstairs. It was colder on the second floor. I stepped into the small room on the left, almost empty. Some debris, a broken chair, an old bed frame. The beam of my flashlight moved across the floor and stopped on a cap lying beside the bed. I froze. For a moment, I just stared at it. It was old, dusty, worn out, ordinary, the kind there are hundreds of. And that was exactly why I didn't want to start reading too much into it. But I still felt that sudden tightness in my chest. I picked it up carefully. My brother had an identical one. My heart was pounding harder than it should have. I turned it over in my hands. It didn't make sense. He had never been here. We had never made it to this house. And yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was holding something that should not have been there. I set it down slowly, and only when I pulled my hand back did I realize I had barely been breathing the whole time. I hurried back downstairs. I looked around and made my way into the kitchen. The flashlight beam slid across the floor and stopped on something silver beside the leg of a broken chair. My mother's bracelet, thin, delicate, with the clasp bent in exactly the same way it used to be. My breath caught. The cap could still be dismissed as memory playing tricks on me. The bracelet was impossible. I placed it on the table, my hands slick with sweat, and that was when I heard the whisper, a soft, wet voice, so close it felt like someone was breathing directly into my ear. I spun around, my heart hammering in my chest. No one. Panic was rising. I threw myself toward the hallway, but instead of returning to the main passage, I stumbled into a room that had no right to be there. Smaller, with no windows. In the middle of it stood a black plastic box. Far too familiar. I stared at it for a moment without moving. Owen kept his equipment in a box, just like that at home. A compass, rope, gloves, flashlights, and all the junk he treated like real expedition gear. I felt cold all over. I stepped closer. I crouched down. With trembling hands, I slowly opened the latches. Inside were gloves, black, fingerless, one split at the seam, with dirt ground into the knuckles. His gloves.
You killed us.
Owen's voice, right behind me, impossible and yet unmistakable. I spun around violently, sweeping the darkness with my flashlight. There was nothing there except the dark and the pounding of my own heart. I stumbled through the next door, barely able to see anything, and found myself in another room that should not have existed. On the floor stood my mother's shoes, the same black ones she had been wearing that day. Her voice came out of the darkness, calm, icy. The house turned into a labyrinth. Doors opened into endless hallways, each one narrower, darker. The layout changed every time I turned around. Stairs led nowhere. Hallways looped back into rooms I'd already seen. Sometimes there was nothing beyond a doorway, except swirling blackness, as if the inside of the house had rotted away until only emptiness remained. And the voices followed me.
It's your fault.
We were supposed to do this together. You promised.
Why did you bring us here?
You weren't careful. You ruined everything.
Every accusation was exactly what I had been repeating to myself for years. I screamed back at them in a hoarse, high-pitched voice. I know. I'm sorry. Please. I'm sorry. But the house only tightened around me more and more. The walls seemed to breathe. The air grew thick with rot and grief. Sweat ran down my back. My legs were giving out beneath me. My flashlight flickered like it was about to die.
You should have died with us.
My mother whispered right beside my ear. Owen.
You promised, big brother.
I forced my way through door after door, stumbling over rubble, chased by voices growing louder and sharper. Every word cut like a knife. My own voice mixed with them, panicked, pleading. I know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Time fell apart. I could have been running for hours. It could have only been minutes. The house turned into a trap that spun me in circles through memory and terror. Grief and guilt merged into one until I couldn't tell them apart anymore. At last, I saw the door, the real front door, exactly the way I remembered it. I threw myself at it and burst outside into the freezing dusk. I didn't look back. I ran to the car, started it with numb hands and drove. My heart was pounding like a hammer. My throat burned. I wiped tears and sweat from my face. It's over now. I made it out. I'm safe. I left that house behind. Only when I had driven a little farther and glanced into the mirror, out of instinct, did I see them. Owen, silent, pale, wearing the cap, staring straight at me. My mother beside him, white-faced, the bracelet glinting on her wrist. They didn't move. They just stared.
We were supposed to do this together for the rest of our lives, big brother.
My hands jerked the wheel. The tires screamed. Headlights exploded in the dark. Impact. I woke up in a hospital with the taste of iron in my mouth and the sound of machines pounding in my ears. Alone. The nurse told me I was lucky. They found me alone, wrecked on the old road outside town. Just me. When she left, I glanced at the table beside the bed. There was a single black glove on it, fingerless, with a split seam. I stared at it, paralyzed, when a whisper sounded right beside my ear.
You promised.
I run my own business. Unfortunately, it hasn't been doing well lately. I landed a major lead, and the client is interested in working together, but it means traveling south to negotiate a contract that could finally pull my business out of the red. I hit the road before sunrise to make sure I'd arrive on time, grab a bite, and freshen up before the meeting. After all, first impressions are everything. The highway stretched out endlessly ahead of me, boxed in by concrete sound walls, but I didn't care. I was happy. For the first time, things were finally going my way. I drove, humming to myself and sipping coffee. I was already picturing the wire transfer hitting my account, and that pure relief when the financial pressure finally vanishes. And once everything settles down, I'm taking my wife and kids on a well-deserved vacation. On the road, it was just me and a handful of other drivers, 2 cars behind me, 2 in front. We were moving in formation at a steady 80 miles per hour. Maybe they had their cruise control set, just like I did. I watched the sky turn a pale gold, the horizon dissolving into the light. It felt like a fresh start. I felt a surge of energy I hadn't felt in a long time, after being stuck for so long in gray days and a cycle of debt. I passed more signs, mile markers, warnings, the usual language of the road. At some point, a green sign appeared. Rest area, 20 miles. I figured I'd stop and wake myself up a bit. I'd already been driving for a while. I'd splash some cold water on my face and rehearse the meeting in my head. I kept driving, counting down the distance. 5 miles, 10. I started scanning the horizon for the familiar shape of a rest stop, some kind of break in the concrete walls. And then I saw another green sign. Rest area, 20 miles. I frowned. Did I misread the last one? Maybe I zoned out and missed the exit. I wasn't sure. It started to bug me. I must have read the first sign wrong. It had to have been 40 miles. I kept driving, trying to ignore it. This is my lucky day, and nothing is going to ruin it. But the longer I drove, the more uneasy I felt. It felt like some strange déjà vu, like I had already been here. The same road, the same walls. Even the color of the sky looked identical, as if it were frozen at the edge of sunrise. Is it possible I've been driving longer than I think? Probably just exhaustion, I said out loud. I checked my watch, but it looked like it had frozen. The hands weren't moving. I tapped the glass. Nothing. I shifted in my seat, trying to loosen the tension in my back. My mouth was bone dry. I reached for my water bottle. I took a long swig and saw another sign. It was the same one. Rest area, 20 miles. The unease hit harder. I felt a flush of heat on the back of my neck, despite the AC. My shirt was sticking to my back. I tried to count how many times I'd seen it. 2, maybe 3. I was stuck in a loop of the same thought. Did I miss the exit? Am I lost? Is this some kind of joke? I tried calling my wife to check if I was losing it, but my phone showed no service. The GPS refreshed for a split second, then turned into a gray void. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Pressure started building in my chest. I checked my mirrors. Behind me, the same road, the same walls, stretching endlessly, the same cars keeping the exact same distance. Then I noticed a small change I hadn't seen before. The cars that had been driving in formation, the 2 behind and the 2 in front, had shifted positions. The black SUV was still behind me, but the red station wagon that had been behind it was now driving right next to it, side by side. The same thing happened in front. The white sedan stayed where it was, but the blue car that had been ahead of it was now driving parallel in the other lane. Panic hit me all at once. I tried to roll down the window. The button was dead. I turned the radio off and on. Nothing but static. I tapped the brakes and flipped on my blinker, planning to pull onto the shoulder and call for help. The car slowed, but the one behind me suddenly surged forward, right up to my bumper, blaring the horn nonstop. I flinched, shocked, and immediately floored it back to speed, my heart pounding. As soon as I matched our previous pace, the driver backed off and returned to position. I gestured at him, waving my hands, telling him he was crazy. If he was pissed that I slowed down, he could have just passed me in the other lane. Zero reaction. not just from him. No one around me even looked. No one slowed down. No one sped up. All the cars were moving in the exact same formation. 2 in front, 2 behind, taking up both lanes. I looked closer at the driver behind me, a middle-aged man, pale, hands locked on the wheel, no emotion on his face, no movement. I don't think he was even blinking. I looked at the other cars. In the lane behind me, a woman, just as pale as he was. I looked ahead, trying to catch the drivers in front of me in their mirrors, and they looked the same. Blank expressions, pale, empty eyes. My breathing was shallow, my hands slipping on the wheel. I tried to think rationally. What can I do? How can I get out of here? There was no break in the barriers, no way to maneuver, and every time I slowed down, the car behind me was instantly on my tail again. I slammed my hand against the steering wheel, swearing under my breath. Another sign, rest area, 20 miles. Again. Am I losing my mind? Time started to blur. The clocks weren't working, but I'm sure I've been driving this stretch for hours now. Maybe 5, maybe 10. My body started to give out. My eyes burned. My eyelids grew heavy. The seat that had been comfortable before now felt like concrete. My legs were cramping. More hours passed. Hunger came slowly, then turned into pain. My tongue felt stuck to the roof of my mouth. I tried not to think about the exhaustion, repeating to myself, just a little longer, just a bit more. I'll figure something out. The horizon didn't change. The light stayed the same. My thoughts kept circling, searching for an explanation. Maybe it's a prank. Maybe I missed something. Maybe I fell asleep at the wheel. Or maybe I'm still asleep at home in my bed, and the alarm is going to go off any second. But the steering wheel was solid in my hands, and the sound of the road was too real. It was all too real. The pain in my body, the hunger, the fear. I started talking to myself, begging for someone to appear. My hands were shaking, tears running down my cheeks. My vision blurred. I clenched my jaw so hard it ached. I wanted to go home, to my wife, to my kids. The problems I had before suddenly felt trivial, meaningless. I can't do this anymore. My eyes are closing on their own. That strange feeling of calm, of my body finally letting go. Suddenly, all the drivers started honking at the same time. A wave of panic shot through me, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. I panicked and jerked the wheel sharply to the left, then quickly to the right, stabilizing the car. I started losing hope. I'm trapped. There's no way out, like being thrown into the middle of the ocean, and the only thing you can do is try to stay afloat. This is it. And then, in that same second, something changed. Exit 10 miles. Food, gas, lodging. A different sign, a normal one. For a moment, I was terrified it would disappear. I blinked a few times, rubbed my eyes. On the horizon, I saw the glow of a gas station sign. I could see the exit, a break in the barrier, a place to stop. I laughed, a short, nervous laugh. The relief hit so hard it was painful. I slowed down. My heart was racing. This nightmare was really over. I looked at the exit. Closed. Blocked off right at the ramp. Construction. It doesn't matter. I'll just take the next one. I kept watching everything around me, tense. The road, the terrain, everything was shifting. I really got out of that hell. I felt a surge of energy and relief. Just a little more. You can do this, I told myself, full of hope. And then I saw it. Exit 10 miles. Food, gas, lodging. You probably won't believe me, but after what happened last week, I'm officially done with Urbex. It started with a phone call. I looked at my phone and thought, what does he want at this hour? I answered, hey, I found a pretty good spot online. An old hospital, way out past the back roads. People say things move on their own in there, and some claim they've heard voices in the halls. There's also some messed up local legend about the place. Probably nonsense, but I figured you'd want to know. The address is... He knew exactly what I was like. Abandoned buildings, haunted places, creepy stories. That stuff always pulled me in. I always told myself most of those stories were just people freaking themselves out in the dark, letting their imagination run wild. Still, I could never resist checking a place out for myself. So I went. The hospital was completely cut off from everything else. The driveway was a mess of weeds. Most of the windows were broken, and the paint was peeling off the walls. The main entrance had been boarded up, but someone had already forced open a side door. It was cold outside, but the air inside felt worse. Damp, stale, the kind of cold that sinks into your clothes right away. I turned on my flashlight. The first hallway looked exactly how you'd expect. Empty rooms, broken glass under my boots, old papers all over the floor, metal cabinets still against the walls, a few hospital beds left behind. Nothing unusual, at least not at first. I kept going. At the start, I was actually enjoying it. I checked room after room, looked at the faded signs, took my time with it. Every now and then, I'd stop and listen. Places like that are never really silent. Pipes knock, water drips somewhere, floors creak for no reason. That's part of what makes places like that so addictive. But after a while, I started feeling different. I don't know exactly when it happened. I just noticed I was looking over my shoulder more often, holding the flashlight tighter, walking a little faster without meaning to. It felt like I wasn't alone in there. I kept telling myself it was just my head messing with me. That's what old places do. One weird sound, one shadow in the wrong spot, and your brain does the rest. I reached another wing of the building. It was darker there, more junk on the floor, torn curtains, old stands, plastic containers, bits of metal. Nothing dramatic, but the second I stepped into that part of the hospital, I felt it. Something was off. I stopped. Not because I heard anything, just because I suddenly had that horrible feeling that someone was watching me. I raised the flashlight and aimed it down the hallway. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something in one of the doorways. Just for a second. It looked like the outline of a woman. No face, just pale clothes and long dark hair. I turned the flashlight toward her, and it died. Just like that. I started hitting the button over and over. Nothing. Then a door slammed somewhere to my left, loud enough to make my heart jump straight into my throat. I don't know what scared me more, the sound, what I thought I saw, or the fact that I couldn't see anything at all. In that moment, it stopped feeling like exploration. It felt like I'd walked into a trap. I took a step back, then another, and tripped. I hit the floor hard. The flashlight flew out of my hand and skidded away. Glass cracked under me, and a sharp pain shot through my right leg. I'd cut myself on something. I froze. That was the worst part of the whole night. Not the door slamming, not the thing in the doorway, just lying there in the dark, bleeding, with no idea where my flashlight was, knowing that if something was standing a few feet away from me, I wouldn't even know it. I started feeling around on the floor. Dust, glass, paper, cold metal. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. Then I found the flashlight. It was near the wall. I grabbed it and clicked the button. Nothing. Again. Still nothing. The third time, it came back on. I got up right away and pointed it down the hallway. empty. One door was shut. The others were still partly open. Everything looked normal. And somehow, that made it worse. Because I knew I had seen something. I felt warmth running down my leg. Blood. Not enough to stop me from moving, but enough to make me realize this wasn't funny anymore. Then another door slammed, closer this time. Then another. I ran. My lungs were burning, my throat felt raw, and every step sent pain through my leg. But none of that mattered. I just needed to get back to the side door I came in through. The problem was, the place suddenly didn't make sense anymore. I turned where I thought I was supposed to turn, and ended up in a dead-end hallway. I went back, past a room I didn't remember seeing before, came into a wider hallway, and for 1 second, I thought I knew where I was again. Then the double doors in front of me slammed shut, by themselves. I stopped so fast I nearly went down again. I stared at them. Then I heard something scraping on the other side. Slow, heavy, like metal being dragged across the floor. I backed away. There was no way I was going near those doors. I limped into a side hallway, my hands shaking so badly the flashlight beam was all over the walls. I just wanted out. Then I saw writing on the wall, exit, and an arrow under it. The letters were uneven, like someone had written them in a hurry. I was sure I hadn't seen that before. I was sure I'd already been there. Another door slammed behind me. I didn't think twice. I just followed the arrow. The hallway got narrower, pipes overhead, pieces of plaster on the floor. It felt like the building was forcing me that way, like every other path had already closed off. At the end of it, I saw a door, the side exit, the same one I had used to get in. I almost laughed from relief. I grabbed the handle and pulled. Nothing. I pulled again. Still nothing. Behind me, another slam, then another, closer every time. By then, I knew one thing for sure. If that door didn't open, I wasn't getting out. I swept the flashlight over the frame, handle, lock, dirty glass. And then I saw it, a folded piece of paper jammed into the corner near the frame. I have no idea where it came from. I grabbed it. It was damp, creased, and looked like it had been there for years. I unfolded it with shaking hands. There were only a few words written on it. Latch at the top. I looked up. There it was. An old metal safety latch, covered in grime and blending into the wall so well I hadn't noticed it before. I stretched up, pain shooting through my leg, and shoved it hard. Nothing. Another slam behind me. I shoved it again. It moved a little. One more time. It gave. I grabbed the handle and pulled. The door opened with a loud scrape, and cold air hit me right in the face. I stumbled outside and almost fell down the steps. Then I made it back to my car and called emergency services. Luckily, it ended with just a few stitches. The police searched the building afterward, but they didn't find anything unusual, and there was no one inside. And yeah, that was it for me. I'm never touching an abandoned building again. It was Tuesday, but in my world, days didn't have names anymore. There were only two states of existence, work and recovery. At that moment, I was failing miserably at the latter. I woke up in a sagging leather armchair. My neck, twisted at an unnatural angle, throbbed with a dull ache every time I moved my head. The TV was still on, muted, casting a deathly pale blue light onto the walls of my cramped apartment. The room was filled with a heavy, stagnant smell, a mix of cold, stale coffee, and the sharp tang of industrial degreaser that seemed permanently etched into my pores. My eyes stung, as if someone had shoved handfuls of grit under my eyelids. It had been a long day. I glanced at the microwave clock. 8:54 p.m. I'd slept maybe 40 minutes, just enough to wake up feeling even more leaden than before I drifted off. Suddenly, the phone on the table jolted to life. It began to vibrate, making a dry, mechanical buzz that reminded me of a drill biting into wood. Greg, my supervisor. Greg never called at this hour just to check in. He only called when he was in deep shit and needed an extra pair of hands. I let it ring 3 times. My arm felt heavy, as if it didn't quite belong to me. "Yeah, Greg?" I rasped. My voice sounded like sandpaper on concrete. "Hey, you awake? It's 9 o'clock," he barked, and I could almost smell the stench of his cheap cigars through the receiver. "Listen, I'm in a real bind. You know that regional distribution center off Route 4? That big concrete block behind the old coal plant?" I stared blankly at the blue glow of the screen for nearly a minute. The distribution center on Route 4, 40 minutes out of town, the middle of nowhere. I was sleeping. I think I was having a weird dream. I know the place. What about it? "The worker, Miller, he just walked out. Didn't even call, just sent a text. I'm done. Keys are in the Dropbox. We've got a corporate inspection at 6 a.m. If that floor isn't scrubbed to a shine, we lose the contract. I need you there now." Every muscle in my body begged for mercy. I was about to say no, but Greg knew exactly where to hit. "I'll give you triple time. Cash, under the table, and a bonus if the inspection goes smooth. You do this, and you've got the rest of the week off." Paid. Triple time. The rest of the week off. My mind flashed through the bills, the credit card, the endless debt, and I hadn't had a day off in weeks. "Fine," I said, rubbing my stinging eyes. "I'm on my way." The drive to Route 4 felt like a slow descent into a void. Once I crossed the city limits, the streetlights thinned out until they vanished entirely. My headlights cut a narrow, trembling tunnel into the thick dark, and the pines on either side of the road seemed to lean over me, as if trying to hedge me in. Occasionally, I'd pass a lonely gas station, their neon signs buzzing in the damp air, but eventually, even those were left behind. There was only the asphalt, the boundless gloom, and the low, tired moan of my old Ford. I thought about Miller. We'd worked together for 3 years. The guy was bulletproof, always on time, always finished the job no matter what. And then suddenly, I'm done. Keys are in the box. What could break a man like that? Why such a cold, sudden decision? The more I thought about it, the tighter my grip became on the steering wheel. Maybe he had personal problems, but why quit like that? The warehouse loomed out of the darkness like a giant concrete monolith. A single flickering lamp above the loading dock cast a sickly yellow light. I found the key in the box, exactly where Greg said it would be. I stepped inside and flipped the main breakers. The building groaned. The fluorescent lights hummed to life in staggered rows, fighting back the shadows until the massive hall was flooded in a sterile, white glare. Empty racks stretched high toward the ceiling, seeming to go on forever. The machine was waiting in the back, a Clark Focus 2, a heavy, beat-up floor scrubber that had seen far too many nights. I filled the tank and poured in the purple degreaser. The sharp chemical aroma hit my throat instantly. I walked over to the side door, propped it open with a wooden wedge, and let the cool night air rush in to mix with the fumes. I wanted that floor to dry as fast as possible. I unrolled the thick yellow extension cord, plugged it into a pillar outlet, and gripped the handles. The vibrations hit me immediately, rattling through my hands, shoulders, and neck, all the way down to my spine. The hum of the motors and the wet slurp of the squeegee vacuum filled the warehouse. The first few hours passed in a hypnotic monotony. Long, straight lines, turn, overlap. The grime came up slowly, old oil and rubber stains turning into a gray sludge that the machine sucked up with a rhythmic pulsing sound. I felt sweat trickling down my back, my shoulders stiffening from constantly wrestling the heavy scrubber. 1:30 a.m. My back was giving out. I cut the engine to empty the recovery tank. In the sudden silence, the warehouse felt different, alien, like the walls were slowly closing in. I stared into the distance, down those dark, empty aisles between the racks. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I whipped my head toward row 14. For a split second, I saw a shadow. Something darted through the gloom. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing hollowly off the concrete. Silence. "Get it together," I muttered to myself, feeling my heart accelerate. "You're just exhausted. You're seeing things." I drained the water, walked back to the machine, and fired it up. Suddenly the lights went out. The machine died in the exact same second. The darkness was so thick I could almost feel its weight on my shoulders. I stood perfectly still, listening, trying to figure out what happened. I thought about the breaker, the old wiring, the power draw. It made sense. I knelt on the wet floor, felt for the machine's power lead, and pulled the plug from the outlet just to be safe. "I'll call Greg. I'm not messing with the electrical myself," I thought. I started toward the door. My eyes were adjusting slightly. I was almost at the threshold when I heard a familiar, rising whine. I spun around. The machine's motor. It was running. The scrubber was moving through the center of the hall. Someone was steering it. I could see the silhouette of a figure hunched over the handles. "Hey!" I shouted, but the word caught in my throat. No answer. The machine glided slowly toward me. I took a step back and suddenly tripped over something on the floor. I looked down. The yellow cord lay lifeless at my feet. It was unplugged. It was impossible for it to be running, and yet the motor roared louder, and the brushes scrubbed the concrete with fury. The dark figure behind the machine didn't stop. I panicked. I bolted for the open door. I could see the forest. I could see freedom. And then, something slammed me to the ground. I was thrown back with terrifying force, landing hard in the wet sludge. What happened? What did I hit? The door was wide open. I could see the gravel in the parking lot. I could smell the trees, yet I couldn't pass. It was like hitting a wall of glass. Why can't I get out? Feeling the onset of madness, I took a running start, intending to hit the barrier with everything I had. But at that moment, the lights in part of the warehouse flickered on. But they were different. They were heavy, a dirty, bruised orange. The warehouse changed in a heartbeat. It looked like it had aged centuries. The racks were eaten away by rust that flaked off into the air with every breath. Dust covered everything in a thick shroud. My hands tingled, and cold sweat poured down my neck. In the center stood the scrubber, the same one. I walked closer, though my legs felt like water. The machine was completely scorched, its metal casing warped by extreme heat, leaving a black, melted skeleton. And next to it lay a body, a human corpse, with hands charred into black lumps. I took one last, trembling step, and froze. Next to the machine, I saw myself. The same uniform, the same boots. The face was frozen in a mask of absolute shock and purest terror. In that same instant, the lights over the rest of the hall flickered and roared to life. I looked deep into the warehouse and felt the last of my sanity snap. I saw hundreds of machines, hundreds of rows of scorched metal, and next to every single one of them lay a body, my body. Some were fresh, others were nothing but bones clad in blue rags. Suddenly, I felt a massive surge of electricity, a pain so vast it turned white, a fear that defies words. The world around me vanished into nothing but blackness. I opened my eyes. The armchair, the TV, sweat pouring down my temples. Just a dream, I whispered, gasping for air. I'm just working too hard. It's just exhaustion. I wiped my face with trembling hands. Then, the phone on the table jolted to life. 8:54 p.m. I looked at the screen. Greg. Hey, you awake? It's 9 o'clock, Greg barked. I was sleeping. I think I was having a weird dream.